We're really creature of habits. We live our life in patterns. Those habits are based on our education, our cultures, our mindset, our trouble. Most of our habits are protections.
Yeah.
Cultural aspect is really important. It might be digging around and finding more deep down habits that people have. To be a parent, I feel like I have a tendency to reproduce the same pattern to my kids, and I really had to be intentional and think about what I was teaching them and what habits did I wanted to set for them as good habits.
Welcome to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, the podcast for high achievers who want to stay sharp, focused, and full of energy despite their diagnosis. With your host, National Board Certified Functional Medicine Health Coach, Julie Michelson, where Julie helps you take your power back from autoimmunity. And now here's your host, Julie Michelson.
Welcome back to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast. I'm your host, Julie Michelson, and today we're joined by Dr. Emma Wagner, a distinguished chiropractor from San Clemente Vitality, who epitomizes the essence of holistic healthcare. With over 2 decades of experience alongside her husband and partner, Dr. Burton Wagner, she passionately advocates for a healthy, active lifestyle through an integrative blend of chiropractic care, energy medicine, functional medicine, and nutritional coaching. Her dedication not only guides individuals in tapping into their healing power, but also fosters a deep sense of connection and vitality, harmonizing the physical and emotional aspects of well-being. In today's conversation, we are talking about changing your habits to create wellness. Dr. Emma gives us tips to get us back to our natural state, in touch with nature, which allows the body to heal. Dr. Emma, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Julie, for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation here today with you.
I am as well, and I would love just for listeners to get to know you a little bit. All of us seem to have an interesting journey into functional or integrative health.
Definitely.
Yeah, would you share your history? Because your family has a traditional medicine background. So share with us a little bit of your journey.
So my dad is a medical doctor. I was raised by a family that had that helping others and caring for others in mind. And my dad, from a very young age, took me to the hospital to do rounds with him, really wanting to get me interested in his practice. I never wanted to be a medical doctor. And when my parents divorced, my mom first met an homeopath doctor. And we started homeopathic care very early on, around age 12, 10, 12. And it started becoming the normal in our house at that time to, when you feel a little bit off, you start taking care of yourself. And preventative care is really important in homeopathic. And then being in France, because I'm French, if you can hear the accent, there's a big focus on healthy food, good food, eating well. And in my family, my mom was a very good cook. She loved cooking. So there was always that aspect. When I was 14 years old, I started having headaches, and naturally the homeopathic was not working. So I went to see my dad and I asked him, Dad, what should I do? And he's like, well, you should take some kind of Advil over the counter. It was a different name because it was in France, but
sure.
Advil type. And he's like, you can take up to 6 a day. And I started taking some and more, up to 6 a day. And I came back to my dad after a few months saying, Dad, my headaches are still there. I'm taking 6 Advil a day. What should I be doing? And he's like, oh, it's normal. You just need to take something a little bit stronger. So I started taking something a little bit stronger for a few months, up to 6 a day. When I got to 6 a day, I went to see him. I was 16 at the time. And I'm like, okay, this is not working anymore. What should I do? He's like, oh, I just need to prescribe something a little bit stronger. And it was something with codeine. At 16-year-old in France, kids start drinking alcohol. I was part of that, and I started mixing the codeine and the alcohol, and very fast I realized that this was a very bad idea. Very, very bad idea. And I could not focus on my studies. I could not focus on much of what I was doing, and it was really affecting me, those headaches, the codeine. And that's when my mom took us to a Silva mind control seminar where we worked on the power of the mind, doing meditation, respiration, um,
That's
visualization, and so
amazing.
on.
Like, what a gift to be introduced to that at 16.
At
Wow.
16-year-old.
Yeah.
So at 16-year-old, I started to discover the power of the mind. After that first night in the seminar, I had a dream where my spiritual guardian angel came to me and told me, you don't need the headaches anymore. You're not going to have headaches. And I never had headaches anymore. So from that moment, I decided to look at what my mom knew that my dad, the medical doctor, didn't.
Yeah.
And I started being very interested in that homeopathic medicine, and the power of the mind, and meditation, and astral traveling. And I started looking into energy healing. I did my first energy healing seminars when I was 18. That led me into chiropractic school when I was 21, moved me across the Atlantic Ocean, came to the US to study chiropractic in the US. And then when you start putting your finger into it, I feel like you're getting swallowed.
Deeper and deeper. Yeah. It's a giant rabbit hole.
Exactly. So I started looking at how nutrition affects us. I started looking at how emotions affect us, how to really connect the power of the mind. So my practice is very unique, and a lot of my patients appreciate that because I'm not just a chiropractor. I am a chiropractor that does a little bit of functional medicine, that does a little bit of emotional work, that looks at the power of the mind and the pattern that are stuck in the body, that looks at people's habits, that is able to look at really what the body needs to really function well, and how to encourage that normal function of the body, knowing that the base of chiropractic is to say that the body can heal itself.
Yes.
And it's about tapping into that natural phenomenon that the body can heal itself.
I love that. And that is the whole point of this podcast, is that the body can heal itself, because that is often the opposite of what medical doctors will tell patients.
Exactly.
Especially with autoimmunity. I was told, oh, you can't heal, you'll just get worse, you'll decline, and so I love what you offer your clients and your patients is what I call a very big toolbox.
So I'm not here to fix anyone, and I tell people, even if I feel like I'm an energy healer, I'm here to turn on your own healing power so that you can heal yourself, and give you the tools that you can use, because I understand what you're needing.
Right.
And I'm going to assess, okay, you're doing this, that's right, but have you looked into that aspect of your being? And most people are very aware of 1, 2, or 3 aspects, but they might be missing a few different pieces of their own puzzle.
I love that. And there's always, we all need the same things. It's just, that hierarchy of the individual of what do we need and what do we need now? I say all the time, I mean, I feel amazing, but I'm still on a healing, like I'm always like you in the rabbit hole learning new things, but sometimes I need to up level, different areas depending on what's going on in my life.
So we're talking a lot about autoimmune disease on your podcast, and I think it's really important to recognize that, yes, when you have an autoimmune disease, your own immune system attack pieces, different parts of your body, and it can be the thyroid in Hashimoto's disease, it can be the bones in RA, there's a lot of different pieces that your body can attack because it doesn't recognize your body as its own anymore, and it's going to see your body as a strange entity. And so in my work, it's really important to reconnect the body and to reintegrate it as a whole, so that the body doesn't need to attack itself as much, or not at all.
Correct. And I always say, and it's when you get to that underlying causes.
And that's where the underlying causes is so important.
Yeah, it doesn't matter which part of the body or which system. It's the same. We're human. We're all designed, yes, we're uniquely individual, and yet we're all designed as humans. So I know we have so many directions we could go in, but I want to talk a little bit about, because I know you're an expert in this area as well, habits and how habits can lead to things like autoimmune or habits can help us heal and lead to health. So if you don't mind taking us in the direction of that world, I would
So for
love
me,
to.
we're really creature of habits.
Yeah.
We live our life in patterns, and those patterns allow us to really like do our things every day the same way. And those habits are based on our education, our cultures, our mindset, our trouble, and most of our habits are protections.
Yes.
And it's very easy to create a habit to not have to think about how we got hurt in the past.
Right.
And maybe we got hurt going out, so we're not going to want to go out anymore, and we're going to make a lot of reasons not to go out anymore so that we don't get hurt every time we go out. So when we look at habits, we need to look at why do we create those habits? So are they educated, and our parents, as good as they are, and
I
I'm
always
a
tell my
parent
kids
myself.
no charge for the bad habits they have got from me. Yeah.
and I have a 19-year-old and a 22-year-old. It's hard
Yeah.
to be a parent, and they're not born with a manual.
Sure.
It's
I always
hard
say
to know what to do.
my oldest is the test kid, you know.
I feel like I have a tendency to reproduce the same pattern and the same habits that my mom brought in when I was a child. And at one point, I'm like, this is not the way I want to raise my kids. And I really had to really be intentional and think about what I was teaching them and what habits did I wanted to set for them as good habits. I'm not perfect. I didn't do everything perfectly with my kids.
Darn. That human thing again.
But I think even for ourselves, and I know they're going to have to let go of some of those habits that I created for them, the same way I had to let go of some of those habits that my parents, my culture had created for me. So it's interesting for me because I was born and raised in Africa. Then I moved to France for 10 years, and then I moved to the US for 10 years. So I see those three cultures, and I see the difference in how we are expected to function and to interact with each other in those three different cultures.
Yes.
So that cultural aspect is really important, and recognizing that it's not because McDonald's is what American mom give to their kids and it's a comfort food and it feels good to go to McDonald's, that it's actually good foods and that it's a good habit to set for the kids, or it's a good habit to set for ourselves. Finding the strength to be like, okay, this is not serving my higher self and this is not the direction I want to be creating. That's where when we create habits and when I help people create habits, I'm really interested in where the higher self wants. And what do you want to create out of your life? And it might be a very easy habit. It might be digging around and finding more deep down habits that people have. Like we are talking about autoimmune disease. I have a client that came to me, and when I was asking her about the food she was eating, she's like, well, I make my own sourdough bread. And she has RA.
I have had those clients.
And for a while, I would leave her alone because every time I would bring up the food and how I felt like the food was inflammatory in her system and that food would create more inflammation, she's like, well, I do everything perfect. I even make my own bread.
Right.
So it was hard to get into that conversation with her because she was kind of refusing to go look into that habit because she was 100% sure she was doing everything right already. So after a few visits, when the trust started building and we're looking at other pieces of the puzzle, one day she arrived and she's like, my knees are so painful. I'm so inflamed. I feel so wrong. I told her, I'm like,
are you ready?
Let's test your bread, because I had a little bit of a bread with our sister had brought me some bread. Or she had brought me a big piece of bread, and I'm like, this bread that you're eating is not good. Yeah. I could tell, I could feel it in my body. She had gifted me a piece. So I'm like, we need to talk about this bread and you have to stop it. And she's like, well, I'm ready to take more medication from our RA. I'm just feeling so bad. I'm like, before you do take the medication, stop the bread. Within 3 weeks, our inflammation reduced at 80%.
Yep.
So
no surprise here, but I love.
I understand that it doesn't surprise you.
I love. I had a client. I joke because often I say to clients, you didn't get in this condition of health or lack of health overnight, and healing this is going to take time. And my quickest hit ever was with a client who also happens to be a friend. But now, and almost same story, except that she had RA and ulcerative colitis.
Yep.
And it was the same, but I bake and I make my own bread and we eat really healthy. She was eating very little protein, real food, whole food. And sure enough, she's one of the few people that I can go to her house for dinner now because she still bakes, but she does not bake sourdough bread with gluten anymore. And
you need to be you have to understand that the flour itself is the problem.
Right.
And you can find better flour.
Yes.
But you need to be very intentional because it's hard to find those flours that are good.
Yes.
And it's not about the sourdough bread. It's about the flour itself.
Cute because she has a bag of flour from Europe. She wants to try that she's had for like 6 months or so. Awesome. Because she doesn't want to, it's like she wants to try it, but at the same time, she feels great. Why would she want to rock the boat? And that's a whole nother podcast. We could talk about because especially with
the difference in the Europe and the American bread, for sure.
What we've done to the food system in this country is scary and is.
I'm really excited about the change coming around this.
Me too. I'm like, I can't wait. You mentioned McDonald's, and I was thinking like, and it is such a relief that at least some changes are coming down the path because
very relieving.
Bad trajectory. And again, when we know that things are so much healthier in Europe and other countries where they haven't adulterated their food system, it's not like we don't know what to do, right? Mm-hmm. Like, let's just let food be food again, and we'll all start to heal.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
A patient of mine was telling me that in the town next door in Laguna Beach, California, they're putting all their 5G tower on their water tower. So all the water is getting irradiated by those 5. And we know, I like homeopathy a lot. I really believe in the power of the water to hold resonance and to hold vibration.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm thinking about those. I don't know where anywhere else in the country they're putting those 5G tower, but if in Laguna Beach they're putting in the water, those 5G tower on top of that water tower, it's going to create so much disease in the population, and people are going to be like, but I eat healthy, I do everything I need, I drink water, and water should be healthy.
No, I would drink water out of plastic before I would drink that water. That's
for sure.
Something.
It's saying something, right? So
wow. Yeah.
It's really understanding our environment and understanding how an environment is affecting us and why it's affecting us.
Yes.
And what are the key, and testing what are you reactive to in your environment, because when in autoimmune disease, I think the environment is really key, and I think parasites is really key too, and looking at that parasite load to see if there is any of it.
Well, and the internal environment of
the internal environment.
Yeah.
The stress, the emotion.
And I know you work with all of that as well. Which, like you were talking about, sometimes we need to really dig deep to get to, where does this habit come from? I love that you said, and I want to just highlight, all of our habits are stories, those tapes that run in our head. Like you said, we're protective, especially as kids. And so step one is often recognizing, where did this come from? And that's not something that typically, it's a process.
It's a process.
It's not that you're going to listen.
It's a process, but it's not a difficult process.
No.
it's not a hurtful process. It's not something where you're going to have to hurt yourself or relieve
Right.
trauma again and again. It's a
Right.
very easy, simple process where you can really reconnect to those trauma so that you can let go of those trauma and start living differently.
I love that. And so how do you help people? Like, where do people start if they're like, okay, you know what? I haven't really looked at my habits and how I'm living. And, again, there is a little part of, I felt like the gal who was baking her own sour bread because she was trying to do the right thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think also we've been misled and misguided as to what the right thing is.
Yes.
So how do you help people
So
start that
I
process?
I always start with an assessment.
Okay.
And I find that I am able to read people through what they're saying, through what they're doing, to how they explain. It's a little bit of NLP, neuro linguistic
Uh-huh.
programmation, where I'm able to see to. I feel like people tell you what's going on, but they tell you in a normal way, and they tell you like this is normal for them.
Right.
And if you're able to hear that normal that is not normal. So I'm going to give an example because I had that happen with my husband yesterday in the car. My husband sometimes denies that he is losing energy, and he doesn't want to recognize that he is losing his energy. And so, and as soon as he drops energy, he's going to make a story about it. I didn't do it. I didn't lose my energy. It's just this happened.
Yeah.
And so yesterday was very intense, very. I saw it happening, and in the moment, I'm like, see what you just did here. You denied your loss of energy, and by just like dismissing it because he didn't want to.
Feel.
It's really hard to recognize that you're doing something that hurts yourself.
Right. Sure. Because we're
And
not
so
intentionally hurting
it's not
ourselves.
intentional, and as
Yeah.
soon as you recognize it, you're able to change it.
Ah, there's the key.
There's the key. But first you have to recognize it, and
Right.
you have those protective mechanism that is going to make you make a story about it so that you don't really recognize. So somebody like me, probably somebody like you, are able to just
Feel it.
feel it, look at it, and tell you look at what you're doing here.
Right. Yeah.
And as soon as you're looking at it and you're like, wow, I'm aware of it, I acknowledge it,
Yes.
I can change it. But first you
Yes.
have to see it for what it is.
I love that. Do you have any tips for people who aren't working with somebody like you or myself, who's like, oh, I want to start noticing. I want to be at least that awareness because
Mm-hmm.
you can't change anything without awareness. That's always step one.
Yeah, for me, journaling is very a good step for people to start looking at what their pattern, automatic writing,
Okay.
journaling, just allowing you to look at what you're doing, reread what you wrote,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe journal about your disease, journal about what you're doing, your relationship with the world, with your relationship with yourself, because in autoimmune disease, again, you're attacking yourself. So what do you think about yourself?
Right.
What relationship? Look at what triggers you. Be
Mm.
aware of it. Most people, when they get triggered, they dismiss it
Well, because
because
it doesn't feel
it's
good.
uncomfortable. It's very
Right.
uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. I love I think the tip I'm guessing some listeners are going to hear this and say, oh, I do journal. But you just gave a nugget that I want to make sure everybody picks up on, which is reread what you wrote. Yes, you can, there's a cathartic, healing
Mm-hmm.
modality in journaling. We can get a lot out of journaling, but when we're talking about trying to create change, reread what you wrote because you may be surprised at
Yes,
what
you
you
may be
read.
surprised. Yeah, and if you don't have the clarity, have somebody else that you trust. It doesn't have to be a therapist, but it might be your husband, it might be your best friend, it might be
Someone who's not triggering.
your daughter
No.
that is
Yeah.
not somebody that's not you, that you trust enough, that can give you an honest, like, what do you mean in writing this? What it
Right.
really means for you? Because
Yeah.
sometimes we write things and it's just so part of the story that we're not really paying attention. But when somebody else writes it, it's like, what do you really mean when you say that?
So key. And I feel, I mean, for everybody to optimize health, this is important across the board, but especially by the time you are experiencing autoimmune symptoms, this is, we need to start figuring out, okay, what is really going on in there? What is driving?
Yeah.
And yes, environment is huge, but our perception of environment is really important as well.
Very important. And it's our stress response to our environment that is creating that autoimmune disease.
Yes.
Maybe we cannot change the environment, but we can change our reactivity to it.
Amen.
And I think to change that reactivity, if we want a second tip, meditation really helps people change their reactivity.
Yes.
And
how pause and distance.
And pause and distance and contemplate and take distance from that environment that can be triggered. And I find that meditation, I know for me, meditation changed my life and really allowed me to open myself to a different world and to a different connection with my environment. And I think everybody has access to meditation. Actually, that meditation doesn't have to mean sit, don't move, breathe, and be quiet. I really love walking meditation. In walking meditation, you have to be by yourself, no noise in your ear, no music, no boom, boom, boom. Just be in your thoughts, contemplate, observe the world, pay attention to what's going on in your environment, connect to it, look at the birds, look at the clouds, look at the ocean. I mean, I'm at the ocean, but you get the idea.
Feel the breeze. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I hug a tree,
Yeah, connecting with your physical senses. And I love, because I was going to ask you and I didn't even need to. I sometimes, and I'm sure you experience this too, you say the word meditation and you can see somebody's stress level go through the roof because they think they have to
sit without doing anything for 10 minutes.
Yeah. So I think that is a huge takeaway is, it can be a walking meditation. And thank you for clarifying that it doesn't mean you're listening to music or a podcast or all of those things are fine if you need to walk, but that's not meditation.
That's not the walking meditation.
Yeah.
For me, meditation is really inviting life inside of you.
Yes.
And it's observing how that life flows through you. And it can be done through the breathing if you're meditating and just immobile, but it can be through the rhythm of life, through the walking. And that walking really creates something in the brain that helps put you in that more relaxed state. And for beginners, I find it easier to do walking meditation than just sitting meditation because we live in a world where we don't know how to sit anymore.
Right. Yeah.
No, so the walking is going to help us get that relaxation going.
Well, and I love that, if some listeners may feel like, oh my gosh, we're jumping all over the place, but really the thread is if we were to get back to how humans were designed to live, and we live in a modern world, so we have to take steps to compensate. We have to compensate for the 5G on the water tower. We have to compensate for the constant input in our food. The food, how messed up our food system is. All of that is why we need to take these extra steps because our natural state is to allow life to flow through us. We just have lost touch with that.
I really feel like the humanity, our culture at this time is really pushing us against nature. And we, as a culture, feel like we should have nature adapt to us and to our need rather than us adapting to nature.
Well, we've been trying that,
for years. And it's been the culture for years. And it's really changing that mindset that I am highly adaptable. I can adapt to any environment I'm in. And I can love that environment. And I can respect that nature that, yes, is violent. Yes, it's traumatizing. Yes, it can be dangerous.
And it's beautiful.
But it's also beautiful. It's also marvelous. It's also magical. Yeah. And if we tap into that side of nature that's marvelous and it's amazing and it's so well created when you think
Yeah.
about it. If you choose to be part of the nature
Yeah.
and adapt to it, I think you feel better.
Yeah, well, because that's how we're designed to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm sure for you is the ocean. I have the mountains. You know, there's always something. Or I watch we have horses and chickens and dogs, and
That's awesome. I'm
watching just
jealous.
watch the animals, and
Uh-huh.
and it's just
And I
watch
think that's what having cats and dogs in the house is so
yeah
powerful, and why and dogs are so companion and support animals, because they give us that ability to reconnect a part of ourselves to that nature.
yeah
And
nature
it
yeah.
is sad that today we only have dogs and cats that we have access to, and most people, except you
I'm
with your
very
horses and your
blessed.
chicken, but I
I'm
was looking
also
at
blessed enough to be well enough to take. I could not
take care of them
have
before.
lived on 10 acres and taken care of all those animals 10
It's a
years
lot
ago.
of work. Mm-hmm.
I couldn't have imagined ever being well enough to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So
It's a gift. Uh-huh.
it's a huge gift on both sides. And but I already drank the healthy Kool-Aid, right? So I'm already all in. I'm in the rabbit hole. And so any bit
I don't like this word of being a rabbit
the
hole.
rabbit
I think
hole,
the rabbit hole is
it's a
really
good hole.
the
Reality.
pharmaceutical system.
Yeah,
It's we've been lied so much and for so long, and
yeah.
it's been 80 years, maybe 120 years since Rockefeller created that new medicine and started using petrochemicals in our healthcare, and we feel like this is normal and this is what everybody thinks that's the normal. For me, that's the rabbit hole.
Well,
Eating healthy
that's
food.
true. If you're, it's true. I
The,
need to come up with a better, because even the Kool-Aid, like I can't say it without qualifying, not actually Kool-Aid, because I would never drink between the dyes and the sugar. I would never drink
it's not
that.
possible. I think it's really about reformatting how we talk about those things,
Yeah,
because how we talk about it is really going to create our mindset, and our mind is going to see, like
yeah,
we were talking about McDonald's and how McDonald's is considered as a comfort food in the United States.
yeah.
Just saying the word comfort food, there's nothing about McDonald's that will comfort
Literally,
your body.
I get nauseous when you say the word McDonald's.
Right.
And I used to eat it years ago,
For
when I
sure. I
was
mean,
younger, I ate it. And as a kid, to be fair, and talk about the changes. When I was little, we would go to McDonald's. You didn't eat in the restaurant. It was actually, real beef. The fries were cooked in beef fat. It was
it's a
not,
lot different.
yeah. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
and so I am excited that we're in a time where there seem to be enough of us having a conversation that we want to change that,
I love
because
it. I love it.
it's I
Because,
somebody asked me, well, how do you feel? And I said, I feel hopeful.
me too.
You
Me
know,
too.
I
Very helpful.
yeah, it,
The time is changing, and I think, yes, it's hard right now because we're seeing all those things, and especially when people discover that they have autoimmune disease or any kind of chronic disease, diabetes, cancer, they're like, oh shit, and
yeah,
what do I need to do? But what I love is that we finally have good tools that we can use, that we can put in place, that we can start working on us and start changing those habits that you were talking about, that is around food, about around what we think, about how we do stress.
yeah, yeah,
And
absolutely.
we're able to change all that, and then our body takes over, and that natural ability of the body too will start kicking in, and it's like, wow, my body can do this. I had a patient yesterday coming in, and she's like, I cannot believe how strong I am. She's a
Mm,
cancer survivor.
yeah,
She's been under my care for 6 or 8 months. She's like, I can my husband even was surprised at everything I could do,
yeah,
everything I was keeping up with him. I was even doing more than him. They're rebuilding a house, and they just bought a house, and they're just whatever doing to that house.
yeah,
But she's like, I'm painting, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and I stop when I need to stop. I heard you. I know what to do in terms of habits. I cannot push myself too hard, but I'm surprising myself of how strong I am. And I'm like, this is beautiful. This is what I want to hear.
Well, and the only limit on that is the limit we put on it.
Exactly.
Really. And I see it, I live it, because even today, I would have, there's a part of me that thinks I can't feel better than this. And yet I know in 6 months I will, because that's been the past several years where I think like, oh, I'm here. And then I'm like, wow, well, now I have more energy and I'm stronger and I want to learn something new. Or, and so it ties beautifully back into this noticing, you were talking habits, and I want to clarify for listeners, we're also talking about your thoughts. Like
Exactly.
this is where habits start.
Starts. 100%.
Yes. And so, yeah, it can be a little uncomfortable or sometimes greatly.
So to give an example to your listener, about a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago, in September last year, I came back from a traveling trip to France, and I recognized that I was not in the shape I wanted to be. I was not feeling as good as I wanted to be, and I needed to really like step up my game and really like look at my own habits. And in September, I decided that I was going to work out. And I was very resistant at first because I'm like, I have a very physical job. I'm a chiropractor. I push on people all day long. I stand up. I thought before September last year, I was like, I'm not going to work out. I'm going to be too tired. Well, I was tired. I was not feeling good. I was a bit overweight. And I'm like, okay, what do I need to do? And the message I got was, I need to start working out. So I started working out every morning. No excuse. At first, it was just 15 minutes because that's all I could do. And slowly I started building up. And quickly enough, I was 45 minutes every morning. And I've been doing this for over a year now.
Yeah.
And I just met a friend the other day that I hadn't seen in about a year. And he looked at me and was like, damn, you look younger.
Yes.
And I do feel better. And I have more energy, and my mind works better, and I feel more excited about life than I have been in a very long time. So
yeah, and I love we talked earlier about, we always need to reassess, and
we need to reassess.
It's not, oh, do these things for 50 years and that's going to work for you forever. I mentioned before we started recording, I was sharing about how now I'm in clinic more than just working at home. And the first 2 weeks that I was in clinic every day, I got inflamed. I was tired. I was like, holy cow, what's going on? And I realized all the things that were back to nature incorporated in my daily routine that I didn't even think about anymore. The grounding between clients, the sunshine, being out with it, just things that were part of my day. I was like, oh my gosh, I need to now create intentional routines to make sure that I'm doing the things I tell my clients to do, because my schedule changed. Yeah. And
self-care is super important. And if you don't take care of you, nobody else will.
Yes. And
if you don't do what makes you happy,
you won't be able to take care of anybody else.
That's for sure too.
That's
or maybe you feel like you can, but at one point your energy will run out. You will drain yourself for sure. So it's really important for me to get your good routine up. To know what you need. Is it a walk on the beach? Is it a walk hugging a tree? Is it spending some time, 20 minutes outside, outdoors? Something I recommend all the time for people. I think people need that sun, and that sun feels so good on our skin. And 20 minutes is enough.
If you can do it in the morning and get sunlight in your eyes, even better.
I personally like it at lunch, but that's a different story. But figure out what works for you and try it. Give yourself enough time to adapt to it, because yes, at first, if you're used to being sitting all the time, and I recommend that a lot, is having a stand-up desk. At first, standing up throughout the day is going to feel weird, and your back is going to react differently, and you might need to stretch a little bit more because you decide to shift from just being a sitting position to a standing position sometimes during the day. But learn what your body needs. Pay attention to what your body needs. And I know we live in a society where we're not taught that from a young age.
Unfortunately.
I think it would be a normal basic course in elementary school, where what
Right.
does your body needs? What do you need to do every day to feel good? And go experience doing it and see how it makes you feel.
Absolutely. And you had said it earlier too, but this listening to our body, which most people, by the time they find you or me, they're not listening. They haven't been listening. They don't want to feel the hurt. They, all the things.
They don't
but
trust their body anymore. A lot of them don't trust their body anymore, especially in autoimmune disease, because look, my body, every time it's hurting me.
right.
And I don't understand why it's hurting me.
But it's because
just
it's
hurting
giving
me.
you information and you're not listening.
100%.
But I love, I want to add to yes, listen to your body, but you said it, and I want to highlight again, there's a difference between resistance in doing something new and actually having your body tell you this is not for me, so it's like, okay, give yourself time to adjust to the new habit and listen to your body, really discern what's really going on here. Yeah.
And if you're doing something that you know is really good for you, and maybe you decided to just start drinking more water, or start exercising a little bit more, or having better thoughts and rephrasing some negative pattern that you have and that you're saying to yourself, saying I am love, for example, is a really good pattern and a really good habit in my dictionary. So when you start doing this, start doing it regularly. Give yourself a chance to see what is going to be brought up by that new habits.
Yeah, it's amazing. We could talk for hours and hours and hours. But I promised you I would honor your schedule. So you've already given us so many amazing tips, but we're at the point of the podcast where you could repeat something or say something new. What is one step that listeners can take starting today to improve their health?
I don't like that question because because everybody is different. And something that might work for your neighbor might not work for you. So it's listen to yourself. Look at what is it that you feel you need to. What is your higher self really wanted you to do, and go do that. Ask yourself what makes you alive, and go do something that makes you alive.
Love that. That's amazing advice, and it's essential for everybody, and actually something that so many listeners need to hear. Because we have to relearn oh my gosh, what about me?
What about me? Yeah. And make yourself your VIP. It's okay to be a very important person. Yes. It's okay that you're the center of your universe.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that you don't care about anybody else, but you're a VIP in your own world.
I love it. Be your own VIP.
Be your own VIP.
Amazing. Dr. Emma, thank you so much for joining us today.
It was a pleasure talking to you today, Julie.
For everyone listening, remember you can get the transcripts and show notes by visiting inspiredliving.show. I hope you had an amazing time and enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity. Did you enjoy this episode? Please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to get a transcript of this and every other episode, just head on over to inspiredliving.show or click on the link in this episode's description. There, you can also find everything we discussed in this episode, including links and information about our guest. You can even send in your questions to be answered by Julie in a future episode. That's inspiredliving.show. Until next time, this is Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, helping you take your power back.